welcome to Get Your Bell Rung, a pro wrestling podcast. I am your host, KG. With me is a gentleman who also has his own podcast called Wrestling with Heart. He also is an on-air personality at WHIN Radio, also a radio personality at Radio Free Nashville. Of course, I am speaking about Stanley Karr. What's going on, my friend?
How's it going? So, thank you so much for having me. I know we've scheduled this for a couple of times now and had a few snags, but so glad to be here and glad we can make this happen.
Absolutely. I was going to mention that. I've booked Stanley twice before, and because of life, we've had to cancel. I've had to cancel with him both times. I appreciate your understanding, you being so gracious. You could have told me to piss off this time, but you didn't. So I really, really appreciate it. You're a pretty good guy who obviously has a lot of patience when it comes to working with people. So I really, really do appreciate that. Let's start off with, tell me about your podcast.
Yeah, so I started Wrestling with Heart about a few years ago. You kind of talked about it a little bit ago. I have been working in radio. I've got a background in it. For about 10 years now, I've been in the industry. And so working for a college radio station in the Middle Tennessee area, I took this podcasting class. Coming from a music radio background, I kind of wanted to try something different. And I had actually gone to my first WrestleMania and SummerSlam. WrestleMania was held in Dallas, Texas. This was 2022, so Stone Cold had just come back for a match against Kevin Owens, and SummerSlam took place in Nashville a few months after that, so I got to go to that event, and I was like, this would be a pretty good time to start thinking about doing a wrestling podcast. But if I'm going to do a wrestling podcast, I want to pick something that I hadn't done before, that nobody's really ever covered or touched on. So I've had my music experience, my music background. I've been doing another show called The Piano Men on Radio Free Nashville, and of course working for commercial radio and playing music. That's when I decided to do the wrestling thing and figured out a way to kind of get a different take on the industry. So I started realizing, because you listen all the time and watch all the time about some of the good things that these people do outside of the business, and nobody's really ever covered that, ever touched on that. Things like giving back to your community, helping others, doing charity work. And I felt like this would be a good angle to cover. Been going ever since. Started with 7 episodes, and I really started getting into it even after the class ended. I was like, I feel like I have something here, and I want to make this my own. And as we'll talk about throughout the podcast, I've got some things in the works that I'd like to do with using the podcast.
Awesome. And I know you talked a little bit about it. So about my first question is basically having you go more in depth. What inspired you to start Wrestling with Heart, and how did that concept come together?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I took this podcasting class while working at the college, and just decided this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to do it, and I decided this is how this is going to be, the concept, and came up with everything else, and it's been growing ever since. Started in September of 2022. I've been doing this now 3 years. I'm in this for the long haul, and I want to continue to make this really special. So I've got a lot of things coming up that I'm really excited about, and looking forward to building the brand.
Now, for myself, I wish I would have taken a podcast class. I think it would have prepared me more than what I was. But even with that class, starting your own podcast, did you underestimate the amount of time a podcast will take? Because I know I did. I probably spend at least 6, 7 hours a day. And people are like, well, what are you doing, 6, 7 hours a day? I mean, between trying to make contacts and scheduling people and making new contacts, there's a lot of work that goes into a podcast. Were you prepared for that, or did you underestimate that, even though you took a class?
I didn't really know how hard it was going to be when I first started. And over time, looking at technology and trying to figure out how it works, obviously social media, we know how to use, apps like Facebook and Instagram and X and Blue Sky and so many different other platforms. And by using those platforms and being a part of groups that you're in that you're passionate about, and it could be anything. It could be wrestling, it could be Marvel superheroes, it could be football, it could be anything. So you utilize looking up to see who you could have, who either you could get on the show, or people that may know other people that may know wrestlers or have any contacts themselves. So it's all about networking. And over time, as I've continued to build on this, um, I've met so many people. I've gone to a few conventions, and actually going to go to another one in November. Winston Salem WrestleCade. I'll be back there this year. It'll be my third year attending. So I've been able to network with a variety of different people, and that's kind of how I've started making my way into it.
Yeah. Now, I love the name of the podcast, Wrestling with Heart. You can really argue that that is a really powerful name for this podcast. What does Wrestling with Heart mean for you?
Oh, that's a good question. Really good question. Um, for me, it's about having passion and knowing that you are doing something for someone that just goes a long way, whether it's feeding the homeless or donating toys or um, delivering meals to people, over the holidays. Kindness really goes a long way, and you just never know what people are going through. And that's something that I feel like needs to be said. You just never know what people are going through, people are struggling with. And so you always kind of want to take that next step. And for me, I think that the title of the show, it's really symbolic of having that drive, having that energy, and doing something for a purpose.
Right, right. Do you remember who your first guest was? And did you learn anything during that episode?
Yeah, so my first guest was Al Snow, and I it was a pleasure getting to speak with him about his career. Talk about somebody that has a lot of passion. Al Snow has a lot of passion for the wrestling business, and you can see that through working in OVW now, and even back when he was working on Tough Enough. He really loves this industry. You can see it. And I could tell, like, when we were having our conversation, you're in this industry, you have to really give it your all. You have to really show that this is something you want to do and go for it. And it's not easy. It takes so much work, and you have to really capitalize on it. And I could tell right away, like, Al's the real deal.
Yeah. Now, with these guests, how did you balance talking about the sport of wrestling with the emotional human side of the stories that you cover with these guests?
Yeah, I mean, I've always I've always said, like, I want to still talk about their time in the industry, and I don't want to shy away from that, because that's what the show is partly about. It's about their careers, but that human element I wanted to bring in, I kind of tried to balance it out, whether it's 20 minutes in or 30 minutes in. I want to start talking about some of the stuff that they really have done to pay it forward to other people. And I feel like if I have some time to talk about who they enjoyed wrestling with against the most, or training, being able to talk about their experiences learning how to wrestle, making that transition. If they were like played high school football or pro football or basketball, any kind of sport that they were in, how they were able to successfully make that transition and learn. And from there, just try to see if you can come at it from a different perspective. And then from there, talk about the human element and talk about what it means to them to give back or to serve their community in a positive way, making a difference.
Right.
And so a good 20 or 30 minutes into it, then that's when we start talking about that aspect of it.
Right. Now, a few months ago, I had, I think his name is Dr. Jeremy Housewright, if I'm not mistaken, and he had wrote a couple of books, Volume 1 and Volume 2, because he was interested in the human side of professional wrestling with the fans and how professional, a lot of people, especially non-fans, will, why do you watch professional wrestling? But he was actually came across people that told stories how wrestling kind of changed their lives and what wrestling meant to them. How has wrestling shaped your own values, discipline, and worldviews?
I've always looked at pro wrestling as a form of escapism, just to get us out of our everyday problems, everyday life, and just being able to have a few hours just devoted to watching something that opens you up into a new world. And I feel like pro wrestling at its best is involving characters and storytelling. I've always been a fan of a good story, right? Good versus evil, David versus Goliath.
Yep.
And so how the good guy overcomes the bad guy and the obstacles that he has to go through or she has to go through. And being able to tell a good story, I feel like is essential to a great wrestling show. So to me, it's always about the story, the characters, and the plot, and how that all kind of comes together. And the crowd. How is the crowd going to react to this? And the psychology of it.
Now, has there been any side of wrestling that has really saved your life or really helped you put things in perspective at all? Like for myself, Bob Cook, who's one of my hosts, I used to watch Bob when I was a kid wrestling, and for some reason I kind of latched onto his character because Bob would lose, but he would constantly come back. Didn't matter how many times he failed, he still came back. I grew up a chubby kid. I was getting picked on all the time, getting into fights, but watching Bob and having that example of it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, as long as you go, get back up. That's what you need to do in life. Do you have anything similar to that?
I think for me, I've always been fascinated by the entertainment aspect of wrestling. Like, you look at people that were really good on the microphone or had really hilarious, like, comedic segments, like Kurt Angle. Definitely is one of those guys that I feel was really good, not only as a wrestler, but you could see, like, through his segments with Stone Cold or Vince McMahon, his humor was just able to come out. He was just such a natural at, like, these one-liners with the cowboy hat or coming out with the Undertaker and the bandana backstage. Um, Eddie Guerrero's another one. You know, that when I was 10 years old when he passed away. So um, being able to watch some of his his moments, his shenanigans that he used to do, with the steel chairs and
Right.
the dirty tactics and things like that, the heels. uh, I laughed, at
Right.
those moments. Those and of course The Rock.
Yeah.
I just feel like, when you have The Rock come out, cut these promos, um, it really just, like, inside, it just takes you out of whatever you're going through and just brings you back to just like a state of joy and
Right.
wonder, when you like watch these guys come out and just talk smack and like cut these promos that like are so memorable.
Right. Right. Uh, you've had a lot of guests on your podcast over the years. Is there one particular guest that their story or that episode really taught you something more so than any other guest you've ever had?
I've had a few guests that I feel like I've had really good conversations with. There's one girl that I got to interview uh, a few years ago, and I actually just had her back on, the Black Dahlia. She is
Mhm.
she is an independent wrestling personality, who's overcome a lot of stuff. She was in a wheelchair for quite a while. She was trained by Funaki and Rikishi and wanted to pursue this dream of hers to be a professional wrestler. And so halfway through her training, she broke her foot, and it took her a while to finally get the surgery that she needed. And now she's working her way to get back into the ring. And it's just such an inspirational story for her. And that's another thing. We don't just talk
Right.
about the charity work in community service. We also talk about stories that are inspiring and stories that pay it forward to other people, in case somebody else may be going through a struggle. And it's all about that humanity, that human element, as I was saying earlier. I mean,
Right.
those stories that are just so heartwarming and touching and really makes you feel something.
Right. How do you think professional wrestling can be used as a tool of for growth and even healing when it comes to people who are really invested into professional wrestling?
You know, it's I would say it's something that you really have to show people and see if they're really interested in it. I
Right.
would say that if they're into it, then they get into something that I think, could be a lifelong interest or hobby, if they decide to check it out and enjoy it, because I think wrestling is for anybody. It's for
Mhm.
everyone, and there's something for anyone to enjoy about it. You got good versus evil, good guys, bad guys. You've got a spectacle. Celebrities come all the time, and now a lot of them want to even participate in it.
Right.
So you get that draw on it as well. So um, I feel like there's nothing better than to have an event where it's like sports meeting Broadway in a sense,
Mhm.
because there's like this theatrical aspect involved in professional wrestling. And these athletes, they really, really put their lives and their bodies on the line for our entertainment. And
Right.
so being able to, I mean, there's got to be something to be said about that, respect. You
Right.
know, they didn't, they don't have to do this, but it's
Right.
something that they want to do.
Yep. Now we spoke about wrestling kind of taking you out of everything that's happening in the world and being that distraction. But it seems like over the years we've seen professional wrestling kind of put their feet involved with politics. Um, how do you feel about that? Because I'm with you. I love professional wrestling because it was able to take me away from all of this crap that we have to deal with in everyday's life. Uh, does it make you feel a certain type of a way when you see professional wrestling get involved with politics, real life politics?
You know, it's like with anything else. It's like with music, with movies. You just kind of have to like separate the art from the artist if it makes you feel better about it.
Right.
And I think that um, us having these platforms, I think that um, we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't love professional wrestling.
Right.
So even with all the negativity, even with all the craziness in the world, if you can find one good thing about professional wrestling that you still enjoy, then I think it's worth continuing to be a fan and watch. And the cool thing is now with the internet is that you can watch any promotion. It's accessible. There's so many alternatives out there. There's WWE, there's AEW, there's TNA, there's New Japan, there's the NWA. You got all the promotions in Mexico and in Japan and all across Europe, and you could just watch it online if you
Yeah.
wanted to. So I think that pro wrestling, I think, is experiencing a really big boom period right now, and I hope it stays that way because we want this industry to grow and thrive. So
Right.
if you find something that you really enjoy about pro wrestling, go for it. Stick with it. You know, just it's about trying to find that one thing that reminds you why you're still a fan.
Right. Absolutely. Have you had a guest whose story was really hard to hear or uh, hard to tell? And if so, how did you navigate around that?
What do you mean? What like which like
Say, if you had a guest that you thought that it would be an amazing guest, then for whatever reason, this person really wasn't who you thought they were, and the story that they were telling was hard for you to hear because it was either something that you were a guest or something that you didn't really want to promote on your podcast.
I always try to do a background check on it on all my guests, and so far we've had incredible people do the show, and we try to create a platform and a safe space for wrestlers to come on and try to talk about how they've been able to get to where they are and how they've been able to pay it forward and spreading kindness and love is our message. So I've always looked into trying to find people that would fit what we're doing, and so far we've had incredible success, and we continue to go for that success into the future.
There's a lot of podcasts out there, a lot of people interviewing professional wrestlers. Is there one particular question that you wish professional wrestlers were asked that you make sure that you ask about their lives outside of the ring?
I always talk to them about their upbringings and where they were from and a little bit about their childhood, stuff that really you don't really hear many podcasters really talk about, their background and their formative years before they started in the industry or got into it a little bit later on. um, if they have interesting stories that might be funny or might be interesting that places haven't really heard before. So we try to find something, little nuggets of information that fans or many places may not have asked, may not have been around, may not have brought up in the past. So that's kind of what we try to find. Talk about their upbringing, their childhood. If they had any siblings, how they were able to get through life in the beginning of their, before getting into the wrestling business.
Speaking of amazing people, Terry Zeller, so glad to have you watching the podcast. I appreciate that. I hope that everything's going well with your wife. She had a heart attack not long ago. She's been in the hospital. Terry's been posting those some really good positive things. So we are out there, man, sending nothing but positive vibes. We love you. Make sure you tell that to Teresa. But again, I appreciate you watching the podcast, my friend. Is there any advice that you would tell those who are wanting to start a podcast? Would be the number one thing that you would want to get across?
Find something you're passionate about. Find something you're passionate about, and just go for it. Try to find something that nobody else has done, or put your own spin on something that may have been talked about in the past, but do it your way. Do it with your brand, your seal of, um, your own spin on things, your own version of it. I would say, because so many podcasting is a growing industry. It is. And so you got to find out what makes you unique and how you would stand out from the pack.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. What is your process for forming questions for your guests that you have on your podcast?
I would, just base it around their.
Oh, Stanley, I think I lost you for a moment, my friend.
Oh, I'm sorry. We back?
Yeah, your camera's not back though. I can hear you, just can't see you.
You can't see me. Okay.
Yep, I cannot.
You want me to try it again?
Yep, yep. So hopefully Stanley will be back. Again, I am interviewing Stanley Karr. He is a radio personality as well as a great podcast. He has people on talking about the charities that they get behind and things like that. Um, let's see. There he is.
Okay, let me.
There you go.
Okay. So you had asked me about my process for.
Yeah.
Okay, so I basically just research each guest, try to come up with questions that and tweak it based on who the person is, and do it in a way that other people haven't before, just so it's different, and you're not asking like the same question over and over again. Like, how did you feel after winning the world title?
Right.
Or talk to me about wrestling this person, and go back to 1985 when this happened. You know what I mean?
Right.
I try to find ways of coming up with different.
Right.
I try to come up with different ways of talking about the subjects. So we try to sound like it's a new.
Yep.
It's a new podcast, and it's not something that's been overdone
Right.
a million times. Like, we'll talk about the Attitude Era or ECW or the Montreal Screwjob, but we'll talk about those topics differently.
Right.
We won't talk about it, the way that they've talked about it for so long, a million times.
Yep. I completely agree. When I had Buff Bagwell on the podcast, we talked about everything except his addiction that he dealt with. And I purposely didn't go there because every podcast that he's been on, you could hear that story 1,000 times over. Want to do something different. So I know exactly what you're talking about. Has there been a particular professional wrestler whose story was just so moving, but also surprised you as well? Because look, these individuals, it seems like there's so much adversity that they're having to overcome. Is there one particular one that comes to mind that really you're able to relate to, but as well as you're really surprised about some of the things they had to go through?
Yeah, I interviewed a wrestler. You probably remember him, Crowbar from
Yes.
WCW. So I had him on a couple of years ago. He was telling me his story about making it in the business and how important it is to have a plan B in case you're not able to get up to the top. As and have that long career, so to speak. Like so many of them have, like John Cena, for instance, right?
Right.
Or The Rock. It's hard to make it in this industry, and we were talking about you can have dreams and going for those dreams, but you got to know in the back of your mind, in case it doesn't work out, what else can you do?
Right.
he was telling me about his career being a physical therapist and how and why he decided to get into that industry. And it was surprising to me, because it's not easy to get to that level, like that tippy top level of a position into being, a main event slot. It takes
Right.
a long time, and there's a lot that goes into reaching that spot. So having a plan B, and the importance of having a plan B, reaching for the stars responsibly, is what he was saying. So
Right.
you got to be able to have a plan B in case plan A doesn't work out.
What is your plan B?
Oof. Good question.
It's one of those things that it's really easy to talk about other people's plan Bs because you're talking about them. But if someone asks you that exact same question, and I get it, it kind of close you down because you are focusing so much on having the project that you're doing currently be so successful that a lot of times we do forget about a plan B. Because if you just asked me that same question that I asked you, I'd be exactly like you are right now. I'd be like, shit, man, I didn't think about one because I don't want to have a plan B,
It's everybody has to hustle, right, in some form or another. Everybody's got a job. Everybody goes to work and comes home. So just want to continue to work hard at anything that I possibly do and put 110% effort into it. That's all you can do. I hope this takes off. I hope this becomes a big project that means something. I like for Wrestling with Heart to not just be a podcast. I'd like for it
Right.
to be on the radio. I've got a couple stations that I've are looking into possibly picking up the show at some point in the future. I'm in the early stages of writing a book based on some of my interviews with some of the guests that I've had on the show. So I'm starting that project pretty soon. All the rest of the stuff, I've got, I just launched a Patreon channel recently. And we're on a network right now, so trying to get the podcast really growing. But just trying to work hard in anything that I do personally is just kind of all you can really do, at this point. Just really strive to be the best that you can.
Yeah, you sound a lot like me. My wife gets so frustrated with me because right now I took on this podcast that I'm trying to grow and be successful at, right? But just a podcast as a challenge, that's not good enough for me. I have so many different little projects going on, and now I just get involved in a pretty big damn project that involves professional wrestling. I can't really talk about it now, but this is something that's going to take up a huge part of my time.
Oh, wow.
And my wife, she was like, so if you're going to be having so much time spent with this next project, what are you going to do about your podcast? I'm like, going to keep on doing what I've been doing with it. I'm going to try to grow that too. I have to stay busy. My brain has to keep going, or else it's so easy to get in what I call that boo-boo mindset. So it's keep it busy, and is exactly what you just said though earlier about if you get involved in a podcast, make sure you're doing something that you're passionate about, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching wrestling since I was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
To this day, when I watch professional wrestling, it brings nostalgia back to me watching with my father, who I lost in 2008. So that made me even more passionate about professional wrestling. I love it so much. So I don't look at this as work. I look at this as something that I get to do that I want to be successful at because I love doing it. Which leads to the next question. Where do you want to see your podcast, Wrestling with Heart, at in 5 years?
Oh, wow. Well, I'd certainly want it to be one of the top podcasts in not just in the pro wrestling market, but in any market in the world. I feel like this could reach so many people, and this this could go to many different directions. As I said, radio, syndication, books. So I just feel like the more people know about it, I'd like to get on more and more people on here. I try to get a mix of big names, independent stars. Obviously, current talents would be cool to talk to as well. So I just feel like this can be something huge. I don't want to just be a wrestling podcast. I want this podcast to be something that I feel like can make a difference, like literally in people's lives.
Absolutely. And that's where I'm at. People ask me that question. What is your first goal with this podcast? And people are always surprised when I say, well, I can tell you for sure what it's not. My first goal isn't about making money. I don't care about that. My first goal is to be recognized as a serious podcast / wrestling journalist that WWE, AEW, TNA, even NWA will recognize me at events and allow their guys and their women to speak to me, because when it comes to professional wrestling, there's so, especially today, there's so much negativity out there, so many negative stories. I want to be that guy that's covering professional wrestling that is bringing good stories, that is sharing good news instead of negative, constant crap all the time.
I mean, you hear so many, so much negativity and so many horror stories, like the dark side of the ring stuff and the tragedy that have happened in the business. I wanted to do the complete opposite and talk about the positive contributions that these men and women have given. I've had the chance to interview Mark Marrow twice, and he just had a book out recently, and we were talking about wanting to, why he wanted to write the book and tell these stories. He came from a rough childhood, and being able to share how he was able to overcome, hanging around bad crowds and taking drugs and alcohol to stopping and living such a positive lifestyle. And in speaking to schools, the guy has been all across the world speaking to kids and making a difference.
I just watched an interview with Mark Merrow a few days ago. And that interview, not that I didn't respect him, but that interview that I watched made me respect him even more, because he talked about how his wife leaving him and ending up with Brock Lesnar, how at the time he was angry about it, but now he says the best thing that happened to him, because that led him to what he's doing now, which is exactly, as you said, being a motivational speaker. That led to him being with a woman now that he considers the woman of his dreams. And I think that's what people don't get. Everything that happens, I don't care if it's drinking a cup of coffee at that time you drunk it or anything else, especially negative things, it always leads to a path in your life that if you're able to keep an open mind, you'll be able to realize that, holy crap, if this bad would have happened, this amazingness would be happening to me as well. And that's what I respect about him.
It's like a blessing in disguise moment, right? When you realize like something crappy happens, but something positive comes out of it.
Right. Absolutely. 100%. Dream guest and why?
There are so many people I'd love to have on that I haven't had the chance to. I've reached out to Mick Foley a couple times. I know he's been busy, with different things. I know he had just ended his podcast not too long ago, but he's done a few, but I still hold out hope someday I get to talk with him. Kurt Angle obviously would be another one. I'd love to have him on. DDP. As far as women, Trish would be good. Tori Wilson, her and Stacy Keibler both were like childhood crushes back in the day. I'd love to have Stacy on as well. I know she doesn't really do a lot of podcasts, but hey, never say never. So that's like an ultimate for me as far as like female ones go, like Hall of Fame legends. But I love the Divas era. Like I love that whole period. I've had the fortune fortunately been able to talk to Candice Michelle, Victoria, Kelly. I've had those ladies on my show. I had a blast talking to all of them. Terry Runnels, of course, had her on my show. Francine from ECW. Jake the Snake Roberts was another guy I really enjoyed speaking with. Buff Bagwell, you mentioned him earlier. I had him on as well. I've had a lot of pretty good guests on, but yeah, I'd love to have on DDP, Kurt Angle,
right.
Foley, and some of the women I mentioned earlier. I think those are like my ultimate, like,
yeah. My podcast has been doing it less than a year. But if someone asked me that question, my dream person, I would honestly have to answer at this point of this podcast that anyone, especially anyone that's made a name for themselves that comes on my podcast, is kind of a dream guest for myself, just because no one's ever heard of me. And look, I've been blessed to have Baby Doll, Magnum TA, Buff Bagwell, B. Brian Blair, Jumpy Jim Renzel is going to be coming on. And that makes me, if my podcast, God forbid, my podcast got shut down right now, would I be disappointed? Yes. But I would feel so thankful just for those people that I've had on, because those people are, legends for themselves, the ones that I grew up with watching. So I always feel blessed anytime I can have someone come on that's really come on a podcast that's nowhere near established, and especially not established in as far as like someone like you who has done so much within the world. If your podcast would say, someone said, you know what, your podcast, sorry, pull the plug next week, are you happy with what you have done thus far? That's why I kind of went into my whole spiel of what I just said was leading up to that question for you. Do you feel satisfied in a way? Obviously, you want bigger things, but would you feel satisfied as far as what you've been able to accomplish thus far?
That's a tough one, because I feel like I'm just hitting there. That's like why I'm trying to, like, I feel like there's a lot more legs to this.
Right.
So, I mean, I could say, like, sit here and say, yeah, I did a wrestling podcast. I was able to check that off my list, but I'm always like in the back of my mind going, I feel like there's some unfinished business here.
Right.
So I can't say for sure that I'd be 100% satisfied.
Right. Yeah, I get it. What is your biggest goal? Not just with this podcast, but other things that you're doing. What is the biggest goal that kind of combines everything together that you're doing that would affect other people within the communities, and not just the wrestling community, in the communities as a whole?
Well, I mean, it'd be nice to be recognized as a media personality. It would be nice to be, like I said, kind of like being a syndicated radio personality in general. That's kind of like, I got into radio. I was fascinated with, listening to various hosts, like Ryan Seacrest,
Right.
for instance, was a big influence of mine as far as, like, being a syndicated host. Jim Brickman is another one, who I had the fortune of interviewing on the Piano Man. He was a big piano player. John Tesh is another one that I also interviewed. So I felt like those two for me, those three for me, like, that's what I kind of want to be, is like a syndicated, personality that people know. That's kind of like what I want to do.
If you only had one sentence to describe the podcast, what would it be?
I would say inspirational, just because you hear these conversations, you hear these stories, they make you feel a certain way, right? Like I had Devon Dudley on my show. He was
Wow.
talking about,
He's such a great guy. Oh my gosh. And I'll be to interrupt you, but I met Devon in St. Louis a few months ago at Fan Fest, Mr. Herb's Fan Fest. And I mean, this guy is, I mean, an absolute legend. So I didn't know what to expect from him. So when I was able to finally speak to him, man, I was expecting it to be okay, short conversation, and he just wants to be done with me. Nothing like that, man. This guy was such a down to earth, just a good guy. He
yeah.
really is.
Yeah, I had the fortune of meeting him as well at WrestleCade. But when I had him on my show a few years ago, he was telling me how he started up this fundraiser called Hope for a Single Mom to raise awareness for moms who had breast cancer. So they
Right.
put on these fundraisers every year, and they raised quite a bit of money to help pay for the women to get groceries and take care of their houses and things like that. And um, also, I had Terry Runnels on, as I mentioned a few minutes ago. She was telling me about some stories where she was, visited sick kids in hospitals and was close with some families who she got to help get these kids to speak with their favorite wrestlers. How many
Wow.
stories, like that do you really hear much about, right?
Right.
These are things that I feel like should be talked about more. And
Absolutely.
it just brings a tear to your eye when you hear these stories and what they mean to them and what they meant to the people that were given that opportunity.
Right. Right. Yeah, man. Absolutely. And your John Cena's and so many other of your legends as well. I have so much respect for them, not just because of what they did for the industry, but for the fact that they go out and do what they do for Make a Wish and a lot of these kids, man. I mean, it's tremendous. It really is.
Yeah.
I'm going to flip a question that I asked you. I first asked you if you had to describe your podcast in one short sentence, what would it be? You said aspiring. Now, if I asked the fan that same question, how would you summarize Stanley Karr wrestling with heart? What would you say? What words would you want to hear from fans? Is it the same, inspirational?
If a fan checked out the show and they've never heard of it before, I'd say, certainly they'd be curious to know what it's about. So they would probably think in their mind, if I'd imagine what they would think it would be, I would think it would be something along the lines of positivity or something good, something like when you hear those words, wrestling with heart, it would have to be something positive. It would have to be something good, something that's good for the soul,
Right.
right? So I would probably say positivity.
That's awesome. Um, going to quickly here be wrapping up soon. I have one final question for you, but before we do, I want to spend a couple of minutes. Do you have any great positive stories about some of the guests, some of the professional wrestling guests that you had on the show that you could share?
Well, I had Baby Doll on the show, and I know you had her on as well. She was telling about how she was involved with animal rescue,
Hmm.
her and her daughter, Samantha. So they've been involved with animal rescue, and she was also telling me about being involved with Crime Stoppers
Yep.
as well, being involved with those organizations. Positive ones. Mark Merrill on Johnny Swinger, uh, ECW, WCW guy. He Was very active, like on the local part of the local school board in his town. Speaking to schools, making a difference. Muhammad Hassan as well is another guy. Made a difference in his community.
What an incredible story he has. He really does.
I mean, talk about a guy that I feel like, here's a guy that I feel like his career was cut short in the company in WWE, but was able to turn his life around by going back to school, becoming a teacher, and now has moved up the ranks in his local school board in New York. I mean, that is a success story.
Absolutely.
That is.
Absolutely.
So anything to do with motivational. Oh, Stevie Ray, Harlem Heat. He had a project he was working on in his local community in Houston, Texas. Doing a lot of motivational speaking to kids, and just really sharing that knowledge and lifting people up. That's something I feel like we should be doing with the youth today is giving them that encouragement, telling them if you have a dream, you go for it. You pursue it no matter what anybody tells you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Last question for you. If you could sum up your podcast message in one sentence, what would it be? Now, I know I asked you if you could just use one sentence to describe totally different questions. You said inspirational, but summing up the message you want out there.
Okay.
What would it be?
I would say one of a kind, never heard before conversations. A different side of the business.
Yeah. Yep, there you are. What's coming up next? If you're able to, mention your next guest, and what nights are your podcast, and where can people find your podcasts?
Yeah, so we upload and get our episodes out every Wednesday and Friday. Our next guest, our next guest that'll be up will be Nitro Girl Chiquita Anderson. She was in WCW. It's another thing too. We also feature people that haven't really been on a lot of podcasts before. So this will be a lot of it will be brand new, in addition to ones that have appeared on other people's podcasts before. So Chiquita Anderson did our show. She'll be on Wednesday. She was a pleasure to talk with. Wrestling with Heart, we're on Facebook. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Instagram. We're on Threads. We're on Patreon. We just got a new Patreon page. Type in Wrestling with Heart with all those, and you'll find us. We're on YouTube as well, so we want to get our subscribers up. And we're also on Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. We just are on Amazon. And wherever you get your podcasts, check us out.
Awesome. Are you involved with the CAC, the California, the Cauliflower Alley Club?
Right now I am not, but I'm hoping eventually that will change. I've been meaning to do that. I've interviewed a few people that are on the board, and I think what they're doing is amazing.
It is. It's the only a nonprofit out there that's really there to protect professional wrestlers. And I always tell professional wrestlers this: fans can join, but if you're talking to people about it, and especially if someone in the business, professional wrestler, let them know this is investing in yourself, because you never know what's going to happen inside that ring, or you never know when hard times is going to hit. And there's so many stories, wonderful stories about a CAC and them stepping up and literally saving people's lives. In my opinion, the difference of being able to get help to pay your rent versus you're about to be homeless. The difference between I have a medical issue in my body, that's really happening, and I can't get to the hospital because I can't afford it. I mean, they're really out there. So yeah, everyone, please check out the CAC. join. You get to attend all of the reunions, which is absolutely remarkable. The web address is caulifloweralleyclub.org. So everyone check it out. Um, I have no doubt, Stanley, that you're going to be part of joining that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, your work goes hand in hand with that. So,
Yes.
Brent, go ahead.
I agree. I'll for sure look into going, and at some point, I definitely plan on going to a one of their events that they have in Vegas. So I've
Right.
heard really good things about that.
Yeah, it was a blast. It really was. Thank you for everything that you do. You don't just have your podcast isn't just another wrestling podcast. Your podcast is different, where you do focus on the positivity. You do focus on helping the communities. You do focus on getting everyone's stories out there so that people who can relate know that you too can change and you too can be successful at what you do. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter if you're a man or woman. There's success out there. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you for having that type of a podcast, my friend. You're
I
always
appreciate
welcome. Yeah, you're always welcome to be on this podcast. I love your podcast. So again, I appreciate it so much.
it. And thank you. I enjoy listening to your podcast as well and what you guys do. And it's a pleasure to finally make this happen. And I look forward to returning in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Guys, don't forget tomorrow night, myself, Bob Cook, K9, and the wrestling enthusiast Mark will be on at 7:30 p.m. to do the recap of Monday Night Raw, and as well as, let me pull up my calendar. I should be ready for this. Tomorrow at nope, on Wednesday, the 17th, I have an individual that I met at the the 59th annual CAC reunion. His name is Chicago Bear Steve Michaels, and he was one of my favorite indie wrestlers that I met there. This guy is just incredible, such a nice individual. He really is. I'm excited to have him on. I'm going to be having Bob Cook on as well on September 30th, though. Somebody he's going to be on. This guy is just such a wonderful person as well. Sin truly does care about other people's success, and that's what makes him so unique. A lot of people only care about their success, not Sin. He truly cares about other people's success. I'm a walking example of that. We'll tell that story on September 30th. Again, Stanley, thank you so much, my man. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I look forward
And
to
everyone subscribe, and don't forget to get your bell rung.